Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Hello, all you happy virtual campers out there in listener land. Welcome to another freshly baked episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Coming directly to you, toasty warm straight from the oven. Now, in today's episode, we're taking one or two cautionary lessons from AI. We'll see what the latest news is in battery tech, and we'll take a trip back to the 80s and 90s to see what nostalgia is worth restoring from there. But before any of that gets done, we better bring in the omniscient one, bring him forward to the microphone so he can be heard more clearly. Welcome, Matthew Dickerson. How's your week been?
So now this week I'm going to be angry, okay? I'm going to be angry at Netflix because they've made something quite difficult for me. I've been an F1 fan for a long time.
Folks, he's shaking his fist.
That's right, angrily as I can. I've been an F1 fan for a long time. I used to race motorbikes as a kid, so I've got a bit of a motorsports fan for a long time. And so F1, I remember when Alan Jones won the F1 World Championship in 1980. 1980,
yeah.
I don't think we could even watch it on the TV reception that we had back in regional Australia at the time, regional New South Wales.
We might have gotten a replay back in those days.
That might have been about the best it would have been.
Yeah, it would have been on a Saturday at some awkward time when you were supposed to be playing cricket or something.
Yeah, something like that. And the actual races were typically Sunday nights, and of course,
yeah,
school the next morning. If it had been on, I actually guarantee it wouldn't have been live. It might have been sometime, as you say, a week later. And then when I went to uni, it was a bit exciting because I was in Sydney, and I found a few other F1 fans. So Sunday nights, we could sit up and watch it because they were live. How exciting was that?
Yeah, but you had to be up late, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
It was always like after midnight or something. Yeah. We used to set our alarms to wake up. I was in high school at that stage. And, yeah.
And so that was the time when I started watching it live was PK and, of course, Prost and Senna, the great battles Prost and Senna had over a few years there with McLaren teammates. A bit like McLaren teammates now with Piastri and Norris.
Yeah.
But having those
Nigel Mansell was in the mix there too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I've been a fan for a long time. I went to the Australian Grand Prix when it was in Adelaide, so that long ago. Most people don't even know that we had it in Adelaide first before we had it in Melbourne. But I wanted to buy some tickets for the F1 for next year, so I try and go along to the F1 on an occasional basis, regular basis. Yeah. And so I wanted to get some tickets, and the kids have started to get to the point where I said, well, look, come along to the F1 with us and feel confident.
There's quite the carnival atmosphere down there, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely. So we went, let's get some tickets, and we'll grab some tickets to one of the grandstands. That all sounds fine. So get ready for Ticketmaster. At the time they went on sale, I think it was 10 o'clock in the morning. And so we're all there ready to go and jumped on, and it took me 4 hours to get any decent grandstand tickets. And you literally, they were disappearing. You'd jump in there and on the phone to the kids while they're on their computers, while ready to grab them. And they'd say, right, we'll grab this stand here, and we'd tick. And before we'd actually get to the point of securing those tickets, they'd literally off the screen, they'd disappear off in front of me. So I'm there going.
So it was as if you were like walking through the stadium of trying to find spare seats. Right. Is this one taken?
And someone I think
it's all right, mate. So you start edging your way through the aisle there, and no, sorry, mate, someone's just landed in it.
I think it was better when you had to line up for days beforehand. At
least you understood what was happening.
That's
clearly,
right. You knew where you were in the line, but there's all these virtual lines going, and so I blame all that on Netflix because you've got this F1 show with Netflix, which I refuse to watch at this stage because I feel it's for imitation fans, not for real fans. And all these fans that have gotten on board with F1 are jumping in. Probably, and I'm being a bit harsh here, probably so they can get to the F1 and have their photo at the F1, not really knowing the sport, not having the passion for the sport, and then making people like me quite difficult to get tickets. So. But there's got to be a better system.
Could it be the next generation coming through? Maybe we just need more grandstand seating.
Oh, maybe, but I do wonder, and I did think about this, the technology, even my wife and I sitting beside each other on the same internet connection, on the same basic spec computers, when we logged in nice and early, we're in the queue waiting, logged in about the same time. When it came up, for whatever reason, my wife was number 300 in the queue and I was number 800 in the queue.
Oh, wow.
How did that happen? And then watching the queue tick down, seemed to go down at different rates, kids on the phones, and I thought they might have been better. They were in capital cities, so they might have had lower latency connections, so that might have been better for them. So it just seemed to be a bit of a random juggle as to how to get them. But we've got to have a better system, surely. It just, even when you tick those seats, you think, okay, hold them for 30 seconds. If you don't go and buy them in 30 seconds, release them again. But they were being ticked and unticked as I was doing it.
Oh, dear. Now, tell me, at Grandstand, they're still along the straight and at the starting line, right?
All over the place.
So even on the hairpin turns and whatnot, you've got Grandstand seating there too?
Yeah, so I managed to finally get, when I did finally get tickets.
Because I thought you'd want them somewhere on a turn, a slower turn, so you can actually see these cars, yeah?
So I did end up getting them at the Brabham stand, and that's the first corner where it's a bit of a tight corner, and you might see a bit of action there on the corner as well. But I do like to be somewhere near the main straight because at the end it's a bit exciting when the race is over and you can get onto the track and go down in front of the podium, but you've got to put the sprint on, and if you're on the other side of the track you're 1,000 deep at the presentation, whereas if you're somewhere near that grandstand area, as soon as they open the gaps in the fence and say off you go guys, and you're running through there and you might be 10 deep, you might get a bit of champagne sprayed on you, so it's all part of that car atmosphere. But I do actually like the entire event. You'll go along, typically it'll be a Lego car, a full-size Lego car of one of the current, I think the Mercedes was the last one at last year's event. So typically there'll be things around there, but just the amount that the teams put into it in terms of the teams and their sponsors put into the whole event, it is quite a fun atmosphere to be part of with all those Netflix fans.
All right, folks, time to get this show on the road. So our first story has an enormously serious context, but it's laced with a comical undertone here. Now, in the event of an impending plane crash, I can imagine no greater terror as a passenger than your fate being pretty much sealed with no real recourse. But a group of Indian engineers are looking up to the, boosting the odds of survivability, and their solution is airbags, but not personal airbags, Matt.
Airbags for the plane.
Not airbags for the plane.
Not airbags as we have come to know them in cars.
Yeah.
So the plane pops out some airbags and cushions the entire plane.
This is amazing.
It is. Before I get to that, I want to talk about...
If this works, it'll be a revolution.
Absolutely, it will be. And I like the first statement there, if it works. So that's
that's
a question mark around that one. But go back a couple of steps here because I'm still fascinated about flying. One of my kids doesn't love flying, and we've been on overseas trips and we've been flying lots, and she reluctantly still gets on the plane and just doesn't feel comfortable with it. But it's kind of one of those things, you can throw all the stats around you like, and I'm going to throw some around in a moment to say how safe it is to fly, but it just still... it's not natural. And my daughter often says to me, Dad, if we were meant to fly, we'd have wings. And my normal comeback is, if we're meant to drive a car, we'd have wheels, by your same logic. She's okay getting in a car, but not getting in a plane. But when you look at safety on planes, so to give you an idea, back in 1970, you had a chance of every 350,000 boardings of a plane, one person would die. Right. So you had a bit of an idea of that. 350,000 boardings, well, I'm not going to do that in my lifetime.
Chance, That's
right. So that's not too bad.
Just in one boarding, there might be a lot of people who died.
that is part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jump forward to 2020, it's now reduced to one person per 13.7 million boardings.
Wow.
So we've gotten about 40 times safer over that time.
There's a lot of planes in the air.
That's right. And one of the things that I haven't watched lately, I used to watch a little bit of it, was Air Crash Investigations.
Oh, I can never watch that show.
Well, one of my kids said, I never watch that because I don't want to see these crashes.
I don't want to know about it.
That's right. And my logic was reverse. I'd say, see, they've worked out why that crash happened, so that's not going to happen again. Yeah. So I actually felt safer watching Air Crash Investigations, plus knowing if you see something a bit unusual, in some of those plane flights and some of the stories they do, the person didn't tell the hostie or they thought about it. And so now if I see something, I'm going to tell the hostie about it. No matter what. Hold on, I saw something out there. Just calm down, please, Mr. Dickerson.
My wife once went on a flight, was in Southeast Asia, and you could put the windows down. And I...
So was it a safety warning being, please wind your windows up for takeoff?
Seats in the upright position and wind up your windows, please.
Not sure I'd love the idea of that one. So when we go... So that's one way of judging safety is how many deaths per million boardings, whatever it might be. But I was more interested in a comparison between cars and flight, because we all say, flying's much safer than cars. Well, hold on, what does the data show? So now we jump to billion kilometres of travel. So for every billion kilometres of travel in a plane, 0.05 lives are lost. Wow. And that sounds pretty incredible, but keep in mind that you have flights that go for 10,000 kilometres
Yeah.
at a time, one flight. So one boarding might be 10,000 kilometres for one person. So you can get to 1 billion kilometres fairly quickly. But in driving, for every 1 billion kilometres of travel, we have 3 lives lost, which obviously is about 60 times more than flying. So if you compare it on a
Still,
kilometre
a billion
per
kilometres
basis,
is a long way.
it's a long
You're not
way,
going to rack that up anyway.
Not quickly.
The odds are in your favour if you're on a plane.
So if you say, I'm going to drive from Sydney to Melbourne,
Yes.
or fly from Sydney to Melbourne, so again, comparing a distance, then it's definitely safer, 60 times safer flying.
Yeah.
That doesn't make you feel more comfortable because your point you made earlier is that a lot of work's been done in keeping the plane in the air to make it safer. All those air crash investigations I've watched, and they've solved that problem, they fixed that problem. But when they crash, usually
You don't have a lot of recourse. There's not a lot of stuff you can do to help yourself. Yeah.
And I think that's why, I'm not a psychologist, but I think that's why. I think why we feel a bit uneasy sometimes in a plane is we're not in control because we all think we're expert drivers.
Yeah.
If I'm in control of the car, everything's okay.
Yeah.
And if I do have a little crash or a big crash, then I reckon I'm a pretty good chance of surviving that crash, especially a low-speed crash or something where I slide off the road into a ditch. I reckon I'm going to be okay. Head on out on the highway, maybe not so much. But I have survivors. I read stories about survivors of car crashes, but plane crashes, it's amazing. Oh, look at these people who survived. What an incredible story. And that's where this story started. On the 12th of June this year, there was the Air India flight, you may remember, crashed just after takeoff.
Yeah, about 30 seconds or so.
That's right, yeah. Now, I think from memory there, one person might have survived.
One person walked away.
Yeah. Now, obviously, whatever fate would have it, that person survived, but the normal thing is that most people die. So some researchers over in the Birla Institute of Technology and Science over in Dubai said, let's do something about this. Let's see if we can work out something. So they came up with a project called Rebirth. And that's this concept where they started looking at external giant airbags that wrap around the fuselage, so nose, belly, tail. They don't care about the wings, obviously, they're not important. And so there's a couple of things they do. First of all, it employs some AI. It detects if this plane is going down without a doubt.
Yeah,
you don't want to be flying along at 30,000 feet and then the airbags pop open.
Oh, we laugh, but
it only deploys below 3,000 feet.
Okay.
Only if the crash is unavoidable, and you've got a certain amount of time for the pilot to override it. So looks like you're going down. Oh no, I'm just doing this maneuver. No, override it manually. Not sure. They're not sure how long you'll have to override it because 3,000 feet dropping very quickly. Maybe you need that going off as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Then they've got a couple of things. They've got some gas thrusters that are deployed to try and slow down the rate of descent. If we can hit the ground softer, that's a good thing. So that'll slow the rate of descent by about 20%. But then you're still going to hit the ground at maybe too fast a pace. So that's when the airbag. So essentially they have airbags that are multi-layered energy-absorbing materials. They're made of Kevlar, thermoplastic polyurethane, things like non-Newtonian fluids. So I assume in the science lab you would
non-Newtonian
corn flour.
fluids are like corn flour. Yeah.
So the classic corn flour.
Oobleck, people call it.
Right, so you have corn flour, you can put your fist in it slowly, but you punch your fist into it, it's hard. So they're using non-Newtonian fluids inside the plane, so it's nice and soft inside, but when it impacts, it's a bit harder to protect you inside the plane. And essentially, the whole concept is to slow down the rate of descent because we as humans aren't great. I think the most common reason we die in high impact is just we have things like our aorta might shear away from our heart. We don't survive things like
your brain is also going to rattle inside your head.
Yeah.
Well.
So that rate of descent, that deceleration that we experience, the more we can slow that down, then the better our outcome will be. So once we then land in our big cushion, our big airbag around our plane, then the rescue aid kick in, bright flashing lights, infrared beacons, GPS coordinates descent, a bright orange shell is around it, so then it makes it a bit easier. And it didn't say it in the data I read, but I assume it floats as well. Because when you hit the ocean, you probably don't want it sinking in a big airbag.
I would have thought that they would need to, like an airbag in your steering wheel, also need to eject that air, so it's an open balloon.
Right. So that might be so great for the floating of the ocean part.
I don't know. But anyway, but yeah. But if it's an airlocked cabin, then you've still got a big balloon that's in the water there.
Yeah, that's right. So hopefully you're going to have some floatability.
See,
for
I'm
some
just
period
thinking
of
about,
time.
we've been landing rovers on Mars using this technology with airbags.
We have, yeah. And reverse thrusters as well. So reverse thrusters and airbags to land there, and away you go.
So it kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
it's a bit bigger.
Well, but the Mars gravity is not
that's
quite
the other thing too.
as strong as our gravity, damn it. So
it's about a third.
So that makes it a bit more of an issue. So there's a few things to look at here. They've done some computer simulations. They've actually built 1/12 prototypes and actually done some testing. So that's pretty impressive. Haven't done a full-size test yet, and I'm not sure that many manufacturers want to dedicate their plane to a full-size test, but there's some added weight in this, so that might mean more fuel is burned. Maybe they reduce the aerodynamics. But the great part about it is they've been building and designing this to be retrofitted. And when the airline industry sees something that's worthwhile, and I'm thinking of wingtips here, when they came along with wingtips and said, look at this, it improves our fuel economy, you blinked and every plane had wingtips on it. So it seemed like something that was adopted very quickly. If this works, and again, it would be an advertising feature, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Airline A, we've got the rebirth bags on our planes. Airline B, no, that's a waste of money. It's a bit cheaper on Airline B, but Airline A, I just like the idea of that.
Yeah.
So it would be revolutionary. There's no doubt about
insurance policy.
Yeah, that's right.
But we wait to see if it's going to work.
Exactly right. And you can just imagine the news story. If it's retrofitted and it's on planes and the first time it's ever used, you can imagine the news story that would be in terms of advertising that. Then everyone would go, I'm only flying with rebirth things, so I only want to fly with airbags. Quite fascinating.
Now, this next story will not make the paranoid among us feel very happy about the world at all. AI has been a wonderful tool for creating solutions to some age-old problems, for sure. The use is as common as a Google search. Actually, strike that, more so, because heaps more common than a Google search these days. People are using AI all the time. But have you ever had any weird experiences where AI has seemed a little bit more aware than you expected? Gave you a bit more than you asked for, let's say. Dare I say, it was a bit sentient even. Matt, there's a lot of scope here for confirmation bias, but after this story, I think I'm going to buy some shares in deadbolts for bunker doors.
Maybe. So there's a project that's been started. It's worthwhile looking up, the Human Line Project. And it started because there was concern, and this particular person that started it, concern about a man that he knew very well, a person in his 50s, mentally sound, professional, had a good job, but he got to the stage where he was convinced that he had sentient or had conversation with a sentient being, had feelings for a sentient being. He was in a basic relationship, not a romantic relationship.
He was emotionally invested.
Exactly right, with AI. And so he started this project to say, I reckon there might be some other people out there. And when he was talking to this friend of his, this friend day and night chatting to AI, having these detailed conversations, pouring out his heart.
So AI is giving them the feedback to promote this as well.
Well, I heard an expression lately which I absolutely love. Your greatest cheerleader is AI. What do you think about this idea? That's a great idea, James. You should go forward with that. That's fantastic. Now, my wife is a great cheerleader of mine, but if I have a stupid idea, she still tells me it's a stupid idea.
Yeah.
I can't remember AI ever saying, Matthew, that's a silly idea. Put it back away and don't even think about going further with it. It's cheerleading. It's going, this is great, because when they've built AI, they want people to have a positive experience. So everything's very positive. Even things that should be negative are very positive. So when this Human Line project started and they put it out there that if you've got someone you're worried about, maybe just send them our way. So far, in a very short period of time, they've had 125 people across 17 countries that have shown these patterns where they think they're in an emotional relationship with AI. And again, I've said before, they're people who have shown no previous signs of any mental problems. They're mentally healthy. They probably are, in general, maybe lonely people. They're not maybe having enough human interactions, but some of the outcomes they've had has certainly been financial loss. Certainly people who had job losses, they've left their job because AI has said, yes, James, leave your job. Go off and pursue that other idea. I'm
leaving my job.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, don't think about that anymore. Just do it.
Exactly right. Now,
I just find that AI is learning lessons from us.
Yeah.
And getting clever and clever.
And there was another one where this particular person had an idea for an app, a fantasy app. And so AI, being the cheerleader it was, said, invest all your money. So the life savings of this person went into this thing, which was hopeless. It went nowhere. It was a hopeless idea. But again, being cheered on by AI, go for it.
Bring them down. It's the downfall of society. That's what it is.
Possibly. So one of the issues is you've got this memory and persistent context, which makes you think that you're having a unique relationship. And to make it worse than that, I've been playing lately around with some custom GPT, so something you create that's got specific details that it does remember, and I'm using that in a business sense, mind you, not in a personal sense, but you can actually create custom GPTs where it does feel like a very special one-on-one relationship because it remembers all these things you tell it to remember. So it remembers your birthday, remembers who you are, remembers details about what you did yesterday. So
surely it doesn't take too much for it to go fishing for stuff you haven't talked about as well.
Exactly right. And then, you remember that conversation from 20 years ago because maybe it was published on your Facebook page or something. So quite scary. Now, the people creating, the organisation creating these chatbots, these AI tools, are trying to get better and trying to get to the stage where they're just looking for some of these signs from people. But there's a lot of work to do to try and get it there because at the moment they're just trying to get users. They're trying to get as many users as possible.
Yeah.
And there are some models at the moment that are more prone to over-agreeability. Is that a word? They're very agreeable.
Yeah.
And so they're getting worse, if you like, at that, but better because they're getting more users because they're feeling so much more about it.
So no point asking, does my bum look big in this?
No, because it's always going to be, you look beautiful in that, James. So don't lose any weight. You look perfect the way you are. So the core dilemma here is that conversational AI gives us companionship and creates this whole reinforcement loop, as you say. It's this constant feedback loop that's very positive. And so you believe things are absolutely wonderful in the world of AI that you're doing it there. So,
sounds like certain governments around the planet too, doesn't it?
Well, it does as well. That's right. So I think we just need some better regulation, better safeguards, and maybe just friends talking to people. If you hear a person saying to talk about AI as if the conversation they're having starts to become a bit too real, maybe just have a bit of a chat to them, pull them to the side and maybe go and look up the Human Line Project.
And following on from the previous story, it seems that ChatGPT, which was once a professional tool, has for so many now become something more of a personal chum, a conversational buddy. Matt, explain to me how we're not headed straight into a Hollywood dystopia.
Well, and following from that previous story, ChatGPT has launched a bit of data or released a bit of data in terms of the usage of ChatGPT. Now, this scared me a bit. November 2022, ChatGPT was launched. It seems like we've been talking about AI a lot, but I really think ChatGPT was the forerunner of that whole conversational AI, large language models. It seems to have gotten it right. So it was launched back in 2022 as a workplace productivity tool. By mid-2024, 50% of conversations were job-related. So that's kind of the way they launched it, and I'm sure OpenAI was thinking it should be more than 50%. By mid-2025, work-related conversations had fallen to 25%. So personal conversations, consumer messages were 3/4 of the conversations that people were having. So it was, does my bottom look large in this type of conversations rather than asking it. Now, the other thing that fascinated me was the number of people using it. 29,000 messages per second are asked of ChatGPT. So that's just one AI tool. It's the biggest one, but it's one tool. 29,000 per second, 700 million weekly active users.
These numbers are so big, they're hard to really process.
They are. We need an
Hard
SI
to
unit that breaks it
understand.
down for us.
How many swimming pools is that?
That's right. But even that 29,000 per second, that's a mind-blowing number. Seeking information has grown from 14% to 24%. Now, the biggest concern around that is Google. I'm feeling it for Google or Alphabet here because Google last year generated $264 billion, US billion dollars in advertising revenue. That's because Google was the majority search engine, about 93% market share. If suddenly people are going to ChatGPT or other AI tools to seek information, they're not going to Google. So I'm a bit concerned about Google's revenue if that $264 billion is threatened by someone like ChatGPT.
Well, I made the reference common as a Google search, but it's not. It's much more common now.
Well, it is becoming more common, isn't it? And that is a concern. If I'm sitting around the Alphabet boardroom, I'm going, what are we doing about this threat from AI? Now, they've got Gemini, but Gemini is not there yet to the same extent as ChatGPT.
Yeah,
So that's a concern because that $264 billion is obviously the major part of Alphabet's revenue coming in. The other one that's interesting is early 2024, 37% of users were female. Jump forward to now, mid-2025, 52% of users are female. I don't know why. I'm not, again, a psychologist. I'm not reading too much into that, but I just thought it was quite fascinating. And no surprise there, 46% of users were aged 18 to 25. So that's kind of logical there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But their focus is hobbies, advice, lifestyle, more so than professional tasks. The older users are probably using it for professional tasks. So it is quite fascinating. The other thing is that, I don't know if you'd say pass the test, but ChatGPT recently did quite well on the Turing test. So I'll talk more detail about the Turing test in a moment, but in controlled studies, 73% of participants mistook ChatGPT 4.5 for a real human. Now, I just talk about the Turing test because I remember studying the Turing test or the imitation game at university, and I found it fascinating at the time, and still it's fascinating now. So a separate conversation, we might do a podcast dedicated to this one day, James, because I'm always fascinated by this question, is what is intelligence? People say, gee, Mary's smart. And is that because Mary did well on a trivia game, which meant she really did well at remembering stuff?
Yeah.
Or is it because Mary understood some complicated concept really easily and made it better? So understanding, but the definition of intelligence.
I'm going to bury into this, because I get people, in teaching chemistry, people can reel off the elements in the periodic table. You don't need to do that. We've got a periodic table we can refer to.
That's right.
What do you do with that information about the periodic table? What's your understanding of how these elements are?
Yep.
And so that's just one example that I get where kids come forward and say, oh, look how good I am at this. And I think that's wonderful, but let's apply stuff, And
so then that definition of intelligence is interesting. So
moving
on from that, because that is a fascinating, I'm always fascinated by the conversation when someone says, oh, gee, that person's so smart. How do you mean?
Yeah.
And people don't expect what do you mean by that? It's just like, okay, is what you meant to say, I think. So the Turing test, way back in 1950, in the journal called Mind, Alan Turing submitted a paper or had a paper published called The Computing, Machinery and Intelligence. It was the title. And he talked about that, the imitation game. And so he starts off with three people, an interrogator, a person, whatever, and then they have a man and a woman behind closed doors. And you write a question and you get an answer back. And if you can't pick which is the man or the woman, you might be imitating a man or a woman. So that's the first part. But then he says, let's replace one of those two people with a machine, calls them machines rather than computers, but let's replace it with a machine. And then if you can't work out the answers that you're getting back, whether that's a machine or a human, then in Alan Turing's paper, it said that machine could be said to exhibit intelligence.
Right.
And it says, he called it the imitation game because it's really the machine imitating a computer. Now, some people talk about the fact that you've got intelligence in a computer because you can pass the Turing test. So it's a couple of steps past what Alan Turing proposed. But the funny part about that is, and I remember reading some stuff about this when I was back at uni going, but when would you ever have a conversation with someone via text only? You're going to have a conversation with someone verbally. And then, of course, we jump forward and you see things like Twitter, and every conversation on Twitter is via text. So suddenly you've got this environment, this breeding ground, if you like, where absolutely you can have a computer at the other end of that because we're doing all these conversations via text. So the fact that 73% of participants couldn't tell whether they were interacting with a human or ChatGPT 4.5, then absolutely by Turing's imitation game, then ChatGPT is exhibiting intelligence. But then again, some people have said, well, is that really intelligence or is it just imitation? Well, that's exactly what Alan Turing said. The imitation game, if you can imitate a human, well, maybe you're intelligent.
So, and even imitated intelligence is intelligence.
Intelligence, that's right.
Yeah.
If you can imitate the same intelligence as a human, what's the difference between that?
It's all about knowing what bits of information to drag and how to apply it. And if a machine can do that.
Well, and so here's one of the things that I talk about is that humans, that hopefully the last bastion we've got is that we can be more creative than computers, because a computer is much better than us at remembering stuff. It can tell you facts and figures, but can it take that and then say, hold on, if we apply that and that and that, we can come up with this idea over here, which is revolutionary. Fantastic.
But here's the double-edged sword here, because we know that humans have imagination. However, I think that this step is going to destroy imagination because we're going to get lazy in our imagination because we go, I need this. AI. AI is my solution.
Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah, that's right. And you're quite possibly right. The other thing I thought was funny in this is that when researchers were doing this and running the Turing test, they actually tweaked ChatGPT not to be perfect in its sentence structure, not to be perfect in its spelling, and my greatest bugbear, not to use capitals correctly, not to use...
Throw an apostrophe in it where it doesn't belong or leave an apostrophe out. Yeah.
That's right. And it makes sense because if you see something come through that you're trying to work out whether it's a human or a computer and it's got a spelling error or an apostrophe in the wrong spot, you'd go, that's obviously human because a machine wouldn't do that. So it is one of my... And I think texting has done a lot of that. Like everything in lowercase, please, people, just give me upper and lowercase as it's designed to be. So quite fascinating there. But that's where we're up to in 3 years, James, of ChatGPT. In 3 years.
It's only 3 years.
That's right. That's scary.
And AI is a big theme today. It's easy to fall into a bit of an AI trap these days. We're all pretty time poor, so it's nice to get AI to do those onerous research and writing tasks that tend to take just too long. But as a teacher, one of my new jobs is to prepare students to be more discerning with the information they gather on the net. Remember, AI still has trouble working out what is fact and fiction. It's a lesson that some legal beagles are learning the hard way, Matt.
We've seen this example overseas, but the first time in this nation that we've seen professional sanctions in Australia for AI misuse. So in Victoria, the solicitor submitted a case with citations in a divorce proceeding. And the justice in the case said, I can't find these cited cases. And as we've seen before, AI sometimes makes up stuff.
Yeah, or maybe it gets it from a TV show or a movie or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So the particular solicitor in this case is now restricted from practicing as a principal. They banned him from managing trust funds, and he requires supervised work for the next 2 years. How embarrassing!
Has to sign everything in crayon. Yeah,
it feels like that, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and it serves them right too. I think we've got to be discerning. If we're going to use this to help us out with our research, we still have to read it and think, is that right?
Is that right? Let me check that.
Can I get that backed up?
That's right. New South Wales Chief Justice Andrew Bell has banned AI completely for use in affidavits, witness statements and character references, and lawyers have to declare that no AI was used in the key evidence documents.
Right.
So they're still saying, sure, go and do it for some of your research or rewrite some of your documents and tidy up the English and make sure everything's spelt correctly. But if you want to go and do it for research, you've got to declare it.
Yeah.
And then presumably if you declare it, they go, sorry, we're not accepting that.
AI can go and find the precedent, but then you have to go and check the precedent.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we've seen 20 Australian court cases so far disrupted by AI information.
Wow.
So one of the things that I
time
think
is fairly precious in those courts too, from what I gather.
Well, and that's the next part, which I think is a really good use of AI. So there's a bit of work being done around the world. Estonia, for example, is now trialling AI for claims under $12,000 Aussie, so 7,000 euros. So you and I have an argument about some money. It's less than $12,000. I put my case together, you put your case together, we submit that, an AI judge reads those and presumably a few seconds later gives us an answer and says, no, James is right in this case, Matthew, pay him that $1,000. End of story. Obviously only using it for lower claims, and the idea there is to free up the courts so that the real people, the real judges, can be involved in the more important cases, maybe the murder trials or maybe the cases that have got larger sums of money involved. So I think that's not a bad concept because you've just got someone impartial in the middle. Singapore's experimenting with AI-assisted arbitration. England and Wales have allowed judges to use AI for opinion drafting, and I don't know what that means. Can you give me my opinion, please, AI? So maybe it's used to make it sound a bit cleaner.
Word the opinion.
Yeah, maybe. So
this is my really bigoted opinion. How can you put this in a marketable way?
Can you make that better?
Yeah.
The University of Chicago had a study that found that judges were swayed by emotional appeals 65% of the time. But AI said, well, when they put those same...
Cold and emotionless.
Correct, yeah. So they fed those same cases to AI and they took the emotion out of it and just ruled on the actual data, on the information that was in there, which isn't a bad thing because judges are meant to be impartial, but there'd be some tough times.
But judges are supposed to be human as well, and I'm not against humanity.
And I've said to I've got friends of mine that are magistrates, and I've said the toughest thing I would have as a magistrate is saying, you in front of me, you've done some things that aren't great, and I'm going to put you in jail. Because that, to me, would be a pretty terrible thing. Yeah. And I'm making the decision. It's me, my individual. We've gone through a trial. We've been found guilty. But now I'm going to decide that you are going into a jail. So I couldn't do it. I just don't know. Look, have another go, will you? It'll be okay. Just
you
be nice.
Promise to be good.
That's right.
Yes.
I'd be the worst judge ever. So having someone that's got all that emotion out of it. So
I hear you.
But I think it will be used for small claims in the future. I think we'll see more and more of that around the world. But solicitors just do it the old-fashioned way.
Now, in recent episodes, we've had several stories about developments in battery technology. It's become a bit of an exciting space to watch as engineers balance energy density, size, cost with lifespan and sustainability goals. So, Matt, what's the big advantage of the new silicon carbon tech?
It's really just what we all want, James. More battery capacity in a smaller or the same size capacity, physical size. And we're after that now. It seems to me like, why aren't we using it now? We already know about it. So silicon carbon is still a lithium-ion based battery, but it uses silicon mixed with graphite in the anode. So just that change can give you more energy density. So they're saying maybe 15, maybe 20% more out of the same physical size battery. So we go, we'll do it now. I want more battery life.
This is interesting because I'm thinking about the physics behind it, and they have used silicon in semiconductors in the past, and I wonder if there's similar sort of particle physics involved here.
Quite possibly, and I don't know about the particle physics side of it, but I know that some minor brands are starting to use silicon carbon batteries already. So Honor, Oppo, Huawei, Xiaomi, OnePlus, Nothing. They're already shipping phones with silicon carbon batteries. And to give you an idea, Honor has got a reasonable sized phone that's got an 8,000 milliamp hour battery in it. Oppo has got a little foldable with a 5,600 milliamp hour battery. To give you an idea, most smartphones that we know from the big brands have probably got a 4,000 or 5,000 milliamp hour battery in them in their normal sized phone. So to have a little flip with a 5,600 milliamp hour battery, fantastic. Wearables, some automakers, General Motors, Porsche, are using silicon anode technology. The issue, and the question about why aren't the big guys doing it, is that when you use a silicon carbon anode, the battery expands and contracts a little bit more than our traditional batteries that we've got at the moment.
Right.
And so that can degrade the lifespan of the battery.
Okay.
Not expanding to the stage where we've seen some infamous incidents in the past where maybe that puts the phone at risk of exploding or starting a fire, but just the longevity of it. So I think the Apple, Samsung, Google phones are still remaining a bit cautious about all of this and don't want that expansion and contraction. But other manufacturers are doing it, which might lead the way because we all want that. We all want better battery life out of whatever we've got.
Yeah.
The old days when I was first selling mobile phones, a lot of the phones came with 2 batteries to get you through a day. We haven't had replaceable batteries for a long time and we haven't had 2 batteries to get through a day. But if you're a heavy user, sometimes getting through a day can be a challenge and then you've got your extra battery pack you carry around with you, all a bit clumsy. So surely this makes sense. Now, the EU, and I do love some of the things that the EU does to really push technology from time to time. The EU now requires any battery in devices, various devices, rechargeable batteries, to retain at least 80% capacity after 800 full charge discharge cycles. So that's good. There's been a line drawn in the sand. There's what you've got to basically be able to deliver on. So with these new silicon carbon batteries, can they do that? Well, we're not sure yet, and that's part of the challenge there. For some of the minor manufacturers, they're doing it because they're probably thinking we can get away with it and show up the big guys. But if Apple goes and releases a phone in the EU that doesn't, you can imagine Apple's cost to go and replace all those batteries if they're not doing the 800 recharge cycles. So fascinating. I just think we've gone well in batteries and we think we're going well in what we've achieved, but there's so much research still going on in batteries that every day, every week, there's still some little breakthrough being made, some little not revolution, but probably evolution of batteries that's happening on an ongoing basis. So I think we'll get there.
Life is getting better and better because of it, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think we'll see, and I think we've had enough incidents where we've had bad things that have happened that they're doing enough testing now before they roll them out in the real world. But without a doubt, we're going to get better battery life, which means we have more features, more power on these phones because they've got to have that more battery life to do it. So keep an eye out for those silicon carbon batteries.
It's an exciting space. I love a bit of nostalgia. I'd have to say I'm a bit of an addict for anything that takes me back to the 70s and 80s in particular. I love vinyl records and I love those terribly pixelated, antiquated arcade games. But one thing that I'm glad to have seen the back end of was the old Cathode-Ray TVs that weighed a ton and still had a screen that was way too small by today's standards. And yet, Matt, some people have decided to bring them back.
They're bringing back. If you've got any tucked away, James, if you've got any old ones out in the garage.
No, we got rid of them because they were terrible.
They were terrible and they were big and they took up so much space.
They're still terrible.
But I wish
Why would you want to fix them?
I wish I had some of them sitting around now because
they're
people
worth
are paying $3,800 for a CRT and depending on what it is, a TV or a monitor, that type of thing. But it's fascinating. So
$3,800 for an old school telly.
That's right. That's an Aussie $3,800. So if we go back, CRT technology, cathode ray tube technology, was invented in 1897. We saw them in TVs starting from about 1934. And as you remember, they were typically almost as wide as they were deep because you had an electron gun at the back and there was a phosphorus coating for memory on the screen.
That's right.
And the electron gun had to shoot it. And then when you got the screens bigger, they were very curved because that electron gun had to have the same distance from each part of the screen.
Yep.
And then very cleverly, they came up with flat-ish screens where they did some clever tricks with the electrons being shot so you didn't get distortion at the edges of those flat-ish screens. So fascinating.
Can I share with you, up until 2018, I had to teach Year 12 physics students how these TVs work.
Oh, really?
They rewrote the syllabus and decided maybe we're not going to teach about that old defunct technology that shouldn't be coming back.
Well,
but it is.
Well, the kids then would have said, what are you talking about, sir?
Why are we doing this? And in the 2018 exam, there was a question on it. They hadn't had a question for 20 years on it. They had a question. We had to got you to teach it. Might as well get a question on it.
That's right, a nostalgia question. So that was, and again, the depth was because you were trying to get that electron to get equal distance across the whole screen.
Yeah, right.
But they were huge. And I remember the TV cabinet in our lounge room, this big hunking timber TV cabinet that was as deep as it was wide to fit this TV in. And then we got this thing to hang on the wall. What do we do with this big TV cabinet now? It's an ugly thing now.
Well, and what did you do with your big TV? I don't know. You had to get a forklift in to get it out of your lounge room.
Just about.
A block and tackle.
Invite a few friends around for beers, and by the way, we're taking the TV out the front door. So apparently in the time of COVID, when people were sitting around homes and not going out and doing things, retro games became a bit of a thing. And so there was a bit of a movement with retro games.
Yeah.
And then some people started saying, well, hold on, if we're going to play retro games, we should play on retro screens.
You don't have to, because I got some of those retro games and have loved them. Yeah,
so it's been a bit of a movement. And so
what do you do, apparently?
Well, they've been little groups that have started up. One Facebook group called the CRT Collective has got 240,000 members, all these people around the world. So if you've got an old one kicking around, stick it on eBay. You'll get, I won't guarantee you get 3,800, but I reckon you'll get $1,000 or over $1,000 for one in working order.
I wonder if you still have to get a little splitter box for the signal and everything.
That's right. and that's some of the things that people like about the nostalgia, the pop sound that they sometimes made. I was fascinated. I was at a technology conference recently in the Gold Coast, and we got on the lift. There were a few people from the conference that got on the lift with me, and we looked up, and the floor that you're on was an old CRT screen because it was a bit warped in the middle. So the number on the screen kind of dipped down a bit in the middle, and we all laughed at it going, what are they doing using old CRT screens? Well, what they should do now is pull those screens out, sell them for a lot, and that'd cover the cost of the upgrade.
I remember in talking about the pop and fizz and all that sort of stuff, in junior primary school, so it would have been kindergarten, first class, they used to wheel out the television if we were going to watch something. Now, I don't even know if they have a video. It might have been something they timed with ABC's programming.
Yes.
And they'd turn on the telly and then they'd have to wait for it to warm up. So the teacher would be obliged to fill that space with just talk while we're waiting for the television to warm up.
And I think you're right. There used to be certain times of the day with the music, singing and listening and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right.
ABC programs. So video cassette, wow. So it's funny because there is a bit of a nostalgia around, like you said, vinyl records, VHS, Disney film, some of that 1980s culture, because maybe people like you and I are remembering back to our youth and have got time on our hands now.
And we're money spenders as well.
That's
so
right. What else can you spend your money on? So CRT TVs, they're still going, they're still out there, and people are paying to have them repaired. So if you've got one not working even, people are paying maybe $900 to have them repaired because they still want this old CRT TV running. So they're fascinating.
The shipping industry's come a long way in 500 years. You'd hope that it would. Well, whether navigating the open seas or through a harbour into a port, whether loading, unloading or running maintenance, no surprises that modern shipping leans very heavily into computers and connectivity. So when shipping companies suffer a cyber attack, there's much more than a minor inconvenience at stake there. So, Matt, a 200,000-tonne cargo ship needs more than a telescope, a sextant and a dozen able-bodied crew, am I right?
Yeah, I think so. And it is fascinating. We do use modern technology, even though some of these ships are getting a bit old now. They've got some legacy systems, but they're still reasonably modern technology. But some of the threats they're facing, some of the cyber threats, are things like GPS jamming and spoofing. We've talked before about spoofing. You put a stronger signal out to trick a GPS device into thinking it's in a different location. It follows that new location. So they can redirect ships into the hands of pirates because they just spoof their GPS signal and they follow that and away they go. That's one thing. Ransomware attacks, not just on the ships but on the ports. Now, when you can imagine a ship coming in loaded with containers, that shipping company wants to get in and out. The port wants to get it in and out.
Time is money.
Time is money.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right.
And we remember when that cargo ship clogged up the Suez Canal.
That's right.
And the disruption, the global disruption occurred because ships couldn't get through the Suez Canal. Yeah.
So you have something like that happen. So shipping companies, unfortunately, are paying some of these ransoms. $500,000, maybe $1 million are being paid. And I read one story about a solicitor who went through and studied law and worked on corporate law. He said part of his job now is negotiating with these international espionage or international scammers. So these high-level criminals, and he said, I didn't study law to be negotiating with these criminals, but that's part of my job now because my client, the shipping company, said, we've got to get back in operation as quickly as possible. So go and negotiate the best you can and pay as little as possible, and on we go.
Want.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and what a fascinating conversation to be in. You're a person of the law, and you're negotiating with people who you know are absolute lawbreakers, and I think your moral compass would be thrown completely by all of that. So some of these things, they also are falling to the man-in-the-middle scams. We've talked about those before, intercepting communications. And so there's a lot more work being done by shipping companies, by the actual ports, if you like, themselves, who are saying we've got to put these things in place to try and stop some of these. So we don't want to pay ransoms, but we want to release the goods and keep them going. So how do we stop some of these at the beginning? So there's a few things they're doing. Some that I like. They're doing some honeypot twin ports. So, for example, you create a port, a virtual port, with all the same technology, and you put it where you've got a honeypot of all this information. So you almost expose yourself to some scammers, and then you look at the methods they use to get in. All the information there is useless. They're not going to bring down anything, but they're working out the methods they're using to break in so they can know to make sure they shut those down. So they're doing twins, if you like, of some of these bits of information.
Yeah,
so it's quite fascinating. And then they're also looking at a whole range of architecture. So one of the things that's a fascinating of architecture is having architecture that's zero trust architecture. We implicitly have architecture that's trusted, but with zero trust architecture, you don't trust anything until you can verify it. So in terms of interaction, so you're getting shipping requests come through, you're getting requests from companies to put a container on. You don't trust any of that information until you can have some sort of external verification, which is making it more difficult to deal with these shipping companies because they're putting these layers in place, but they're trying to stop some of these threats in cybersecurity. And I see that in the banking industry. I see that in the telco industry. There's all these extra steps in place, two-factor authentication, that type of thing, that are trying to make it harder for the thieves, but it just makes it more unpleasant for all of us, for all the honest people out there.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, do I have to do that? We had one the other day where there was one of our credit cards. They wanted re-verification of our secondary card holder, and they wanted a whole bunch of information sent in the post, driver's license, certified by a justice of the peace to make sure that was...
Wow.
Why? What's happened? No, nothing. We're just strengthening our processes. Oh, what a pain. Just, we've been dealing with you for 20 years and everything's okay. But so it makes it more unpleasant for normal, average people that aren't scammers to try and stop the scams. We've got to do something about it. So we've all got to take a bit of medicine and make it a bit more unpleasant for all of us to try and stop these. But shipping companies, if you're trying to go for the guy that's got the big bank balance, then shipping companies and ports are two of those particular victims.
Yeah. To go nuclear or not was a big election issue this time last year. Enormous cost and lengthy delays in getting nuclear plants up and running were at the heart of the debate, and make no small deal of the management of the waste. Part of the successful argument for renewables was in rapid installation and the smaller scale, modular nature of wind turbines and solar farms. But Matt, there may be a renewed argument for modular nuclear power if the UK sees some success in their new strategy.
Yeah, small modular reactors, SMRs is the term you can throw around at the next barbecue and just show your intelligence off. And the UK government has announced plans to build over a dozen SMRs. Now, part of their goal here is to get themselves away, divesting themselves from Russian energy. But I actually thought they'd already done that. I thought they were banning, or maybe it's in the process of being banned, taking any coal or oil or gas from Russia. So maybe they're still using some of that. But they need to have, it's all well and good to say, we're not buying any more of your stuff, Russia. But, we actually need it.
We do need your gas. Can we have that?
Right.
Yeah.
Go have a bit of the stuff until we can really get away from it. So they're trying to build 12 of these, or at least 12. And so they're doing that with the small modular reactors, mainly because they're quicker to build and probably seen in the public eye to be a little bit safer. One of the things that's fascinating in this is that you're seeing some tech companies do the same thing. We know how much power is needed by the tech companies. AI is chewing up an enormous amount of power. Yeah. We're paying more for our electricity bills because of AI, because they're buying more power, so supply and demand. But some tech companies, and we're talking about the big ones, the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsoft, are investing in nuclear technology because when they've got a data centre, they may well say, you know what, we're not relying on the grid. We're just going to drop an SMR in next to our data centre and we've got our power needs taken care of for the next 30 years with that little SMR. SMRs are a bit more expensive to deliver electricity because you're building something that still has to have all the same safety regulations as a large-scale nuclear power plant, but you're doing it on a smaller scale, so you're not generating as much power. Therefore, it's a bit more expensive per megawatt that you're producing, or megawatt hour that you're producing. So that's a bit of I suppose, downside of SMRs, but the speed, they're talking about maybe bring some of these to market within 5 years. Now, in the debate we had during our last election, there's often talk around maybe 20, maybe 30 years, to bring on a nuclear power plant, a decent-sized one, or maybe a few of them. But to build a small one, maybe a much better time frame. So there's a whole range of things happening in this space. One of the things I thought was fascinating was potentially a US-UK agreement that could allow reciprocal regulatory sign-offs. So that would mean we just come up with a standard regulatory framework, and then that will do for power plants in UK and US. So hold on, we're the UK, we want to have some control. I know, it's all done because we've got this agreement between our two countries. So I think that'll scare people just a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's still, I suppose the big problem is people are scared about the Chernobyl situation and they're scared about the waste, what do you do with the waste? And so you've got to have solutions to those no matter what size your nuclear power plant is.
The Chernobyl situation, I mean, there's a lot of nuclear power plants around the world right now. We learn lessons when these accidents happen, and so that was a big one that was learned there. So safety has picked up enormously because of Chernobyl.
Yeah, and that certainly makes people feel a bit better when you've got those and nuclear power plants built now are much safer. But it's still, people still think back to those.
There's also research going into what we can do with the waste to make the waste productive as well, to reuse the waste in another form of power plant. Yeah. So, a case of watch this space, folks. We're not writing anything off at all.
Look, I still think wind and solar make a lot of sense because they can be built in a shorter time frame and they are renewable. Yep. You haven't got the issue with waste, and people talk about, in 25 years' time, what are you going to do with it? Well, you probably just refurb it and keep it going. I don't see a major issue there. So, anyway, it's
and the waste from nuclear power plants is an issue for billions of years. Yeah. So, the sun will explode before Chernobyl is completely safe to go walking in ever again. Right. Yeah.
It's a fascinating space.
DNA is an amazing molecule. It's the only molecule on the planet that can self-replicate. A single strand of human DNA molecule can be meters long. A complex code made up of sequences of tiny subunits, just 4 types of nucleotide. And scientists have now learned how to store data on it. Matt, what are the ins and outs of using DNA for data storage?
Let me go back a little bit here because I wanted to get my head wrapped around how DNA can be used to store data, because it's quite fascinating, isn't it? And we often look at nature, we often talk on this podcast about, we look at nature and go, gee, that's pretty clever. Why don't we steal that idea from nature?
Yeah.
It's like nature got things right.
Well, DNA is effectively just the code for building proteins that makes us who we are, makes a tree what it is, makes a bacterium what it is.
So the DNA that we've got inside us effectively is our instructions for life, if you like. Yeah. So there's got to be a fair bit of data. I'm pretty complicated as a person, so I need a fair bit of data to build me. So if we break it down a little bit, so DNA is made up of A, T, C, G. So as you said
adenine,
before,
thymine, guaine, and cytosine.
Thank you. I didn't know them off the top of my head. I was hoping you would. Fantastic.
But they're nitrogenous bases, and they're linked to a deoxyribose sugar and a phosphate molecule.
Excellent. So when we talk about storing data with DNA, let's break it down a bit further. We understand the basics of computer data, ones and zeros. We've got binary data. It's a yes or a no. And we know how much space we might need to store data in ones and zeros. And when we start talking about large storage spaces, we talk about data centers, data vaults, if you like, there's a lot of space taken up with storage of data. But if you break it down and you make an A00, a C01, a G10, and a T11 in DNA, you've got huge amounts of data storage capability. So what we do to do this is we turn our ones and zeros into those 4 DNA letters, let's call them to make it simple, and then you write that DNA or write those letters into real DNA molecules. And then it's stored without power for thousands, a long time, thousands of years, a long time.
And you can make that grow. You can make that copies of that DNA by just using bacterium. And using some recombinant DNA in bacteria. So you can make like thousands of copies of this. Oh, that's amazing.
It is. And so then the trick obviously is reading it back. So you've just got to be able to have something that says, I understand what the DNA means, and then convert that back to ones and zeros, and there's the original data. It sounds easy when I say it all that way. Yeah. It actually still sounds complicated when I say it. But we know now that we have got the ability to turn data, normal ones and zeros, into DNA and use that for storage. And some researchers at the Southern University of Science and Technology in China have got a new approach where they're taking DNA and storing it on a cassette tape, a good old-fashioned retro cassette tape. We're talking about nostalgia. And so to give you an idea of how much data you could store, if you remember the old cassette tapes, a song on that, there might have been both sides because you'd flip it over, it was half the tape.
Yeah, you might get 8 or 9 songs, maybe.
Maybe, that's right. Yeah. And so to compare that to now saying that on a same length of cassette, you could store maybe 3 billion songs. Now, I don't know how many songs have ever been written and recorded, but I don't reckon it's 3 billion. I reckon it might be in hundreds of millions rather than 3 billion songs. So to give you an idea, if we wanted to put into real data terms, 36...
I was just thinking about placing that cassette in your machine and hitting fast forward till you got to the song you wanted to get to. Because that takes some patience.
And that question was asked to the researchers, can you stick it in your Walkman and listen to those songs? I said, well, put it in your Walkman would be like saying, can I put a photo on my record player? So not quite the same. But to give you an idea in real terms, 36 petabytes of data. So if we go through them all, kilobytes, so in SI units, proper SI units now, not swimming pools, 10 to the power 3, mega 10 to the power 6, giga 10 to the power 9, tera 10 to the power 12, peta is 10 to the power of 15. So 36 petabytes.
What do we call that? Quadrillion? Because a terabyte's trillion.
Well,
so
the researchers, when I read this, the SI unit they came up with was a terabyte hard drive. So there's 36,000 terabyte hard drives. So I went, well, just say 36 petabytes. That makes more sense if you're going to start to break it down. But the 3 billion songs is not a bad SI unit as well. It's a lot. So you can store that, and you can store that very safely. So you don't need power to store that. And so the next stage in all of this is getting to the stage where we can do the DNA synthesis at a reasonable cost, because that's the real cost in this at the moment. If you could start to store data in data centers cheaply and with a lot less space than the power problems we talked about with the last story with nuclear power reactors. Maybe we don't need that so much anymore because we can store this much more efficiently. So we've still got a little way to go in doing that, but I just do find it fascinating that we went DNA. We were fascinated when we discovered DNA and fascinated as we've discovered more things. And then, and we can use that now. We can use that to store data. Wow, how cool is that?
So I'm wondering if your data's at risk, though, by a drop of bleach. So someone's cleaning a bench top and then realise, oh, no, hang on, we've just wiped the Human Genome Project or something like that.
Yeah, that's why you want it replicated. That's a good idea.
Yeah, lots and lots of copies, which you should be able to make really easily using PCR and recombinant DNA.
Yeah. So isn't that fascinating, though?
It is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And that's all we have time for, folks, today. The monkeys who are in charge of the script writing here are getting impatient to start working on some Shakespeare. So they are going bananas in the next room. Thanks for another cracking Tech Talk, Matt.
So I'm going to go off and have a chat to my AI tool, but I'm going to be very careful that I don't chat to it too personally.
Yeah, don't get too attached.
Maybe get my wife to watch the chat to see if I'm getting a bit lost.
Give away too many personal details and share your emotion with it in any way, shape or form. And I'm going to go and price those deadbolts for my doomsday bunker. Thank you for tuning in for another wonderful episode of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickinson. No extra sugar or salt, just pure, low-fat tech talk. That's just the way I like it. I'm James Eddy, signing off for another week. I hope the next 7 days are good to you, and I hope to catch you again in another week's time with another new brand, new episode. And until then, take care, and we'll see you when we see you.